especially in meditation, but at other times throughout your day, it's really important that you allow there be gaps in your consciousness. Try to think your next thought, and you'll feel that lovely space, that lovely gap in consciousness, gap in the thought in between your thought. And that's where the magic happens. That's when you can actually access and tune in to your true consciousness, your highest consciousness. That's where you feel God, Source, Chi. The man-made world wants you to fill up those wild, empty spaces. The man-made world wants you to neglect your need for space. It wants you to feel that being empty is a sin, and that tuning into that seemingly nothingness is unproductive, ineffective, and a waste of time. But this couldn't be further from the truth. I call it the wild spaces between our thoughts. And it's this wilderness of consciousness that is healing. When we meditate and we go into those spaces, it's so nourishing and healing and uplifting. Try it. Play with it. Be curious about that space. It's in that space that we often receive the solution, the creative answer. But I don't want you to go in there with an ulterior motive. I don't want you to go in there trying to do something, because that defeats the whole purpose of being in the nothingness, of being in that stillness. Be still and know that I am God. The stillness is another name for that wild space. And it's a really fertile place to visit. But again, going there with no agenda is really important. So don't put an agenda on it. Just let it be free and wild. Let it be freedom. And remember, the man-made world, it wants you to panic and freak out when you're in your true power. Because when you're comfortable in that space, in that high consciousness, the truth is revealed and you know that you don't need anything. Your desires are not haunting you. You're not chasing anything in that space. You realize that you are nothing and everything all at the same time. And you're able to become everything because you are nothing. There's always a paradox in the spiritual truths. And that's one of them. More and more, we're moving away from stillness. More and more, we're disconnecting from our true essence, which is that nothingness, which is everything. Allow yourself to become nothing. And if that's uncomfortable for you, if you feel resistance, it's because the ego has been so trained, so taught to seek, to chase, to run, to conquer, to consume, to eat. But the higher you, the highest God self you, doesn't need to do any of that. It just simply is. And it is all powerful in its isness. When you know this, you realize that all the stuff we think is important doesn't matter. When you're able to go into that stillness, it's a merging of heaven and earth. It's a synergy. And you're no longer in a state of need or desire or with any set agenda. So try it with your thinking. Try to think your next thought. Do it with me. And the next thought is, it's really nice when you can just exist and let yourself be in that space. It's really heightened when you use it in meditation, in yoga practice, running. We naturally do it. We do it all the time. You know, daydreams is kind of a natural way of going into that beautiful God force, nothingness and everythingness. I always say you should never interrupt someone who's daydreaming because they're doing really, really good spiritual work. So I'd love to know your thoughts on this, or your thought between thought. Just notice how when you become familiar with that space, you don't need to consume so much. You don't need to feel so incomplete and so unworthy or like you're not enough, because you know when you're in that space that you are everything and you have access to everything, and you have this absolute panoramic perspective on the truth. And the powers that be and the advertisers do not want you to know this. They want to keep you hungry and, you know, unsatisfied. But that space, that is pure satisfaction. Yeah, that's the way I'd put it. It's very, very satisfying. Now don't worry, you're not going to stay there, because life will call you forward and you naturally will be pulled out of it, and that's fine. And then you move on to the next thing, and that's part of the physical life experience. But it does create more balance and more healing when we are able to exist in that nothingness, in that stillness, and to become the stillness. And that's what mastery is all about. Namaste.